Welcome back, everybody. Unfortunately, we're doing another video like this where the ATF, DOJ, and the president are overreaching their authority and trying to turn people into criminals. Before I get into the details, the action step for this video, folks, is to contact your representatives. Only Congress can make law. The president, the ATF cannot make law. That's what they're attempting to do here. Anyway, as of when I'm recording this, the president has not spoken about this yet, but the White House has released a fact sheet and the DOJ memo pertaining to it has leaked out. The DOJ memo will be at the end. I'm going to go over the fact sheet, though, because it's more detailed than what is in the DOJ memo. Both are important, of course, but it is what it is. So the fact sheet is the Biden administration cracks down on ghost guns, ensures that ATF has leadership it needs to enforce our gun laws. So the first part of it goes over the fact that they are nominating another far left statist to run the ATF. This man is corrupt and he is a political animal, and all he wants to do is strip you of your right to defend your family as you see fit as a law-abiding citizen. I will probably do another video on this man coming up in the next few days, but that, in my opinion, is the least important of this because there's a good chance he won't get approved because of his tyrannical ways. Cracking down on ghost guns, the weapon of choice for many violent criminals is what it says, and I'll just read it and then discuss it. So today, the President and Deputy Attorney General will announce that the U.S. Department of Justice has issued a final rule, mind you, to rein in the proliferation of ghost guns, unserialized, privately made firearms that law enforcement are increasingly recovering at crime scenes in cities across the country. Last year alone, there were approximately 20,000 suspected, which is key, ghost guns reported to the ATF as having been recovered by law enforcement in criminal investigations, a tenfold increase from 2016. Because ghost guns lack the serial numbers marked on other firearms, law enforcement has an exceedingly difficult time tracing a ghost gun found at a crime scene back to an individual purchaser. So, 20,000 ghost guns, you say. That may have something to do with the fact that the ATF is, instead of just counting what they would traditionally call a ghost gun, which is something like this, which is an 80% frame or receiver that is not finished, that is not capable of becoming a firearm without extensive work being done on it. They've traditionally called these ghost guns, which is probably what they were tracking in 2016, but in 2020 they magically started tracing, counting guns that had their serial numbers scratched off or were illegible as ghost guns. So, I mean, criminals have for decades been scratching serial numbers off of firearms, but nowadays those are suspected ghost guns in their terms. So moving on, the final rule bans the business of manufacturing the most accessible ghost guns, such as unserialized, quote unquote, buy, build, shoot kits that individuals can buy online at a store without a background check and can readily assemble into a working firearm in as little as 30 minutes with equipment they have at home. This rule clarifies that these kits are firearms under the Gun Control Act, and that commercial manufacturers of such kits must therefore become licensed and include serial numbers on the kit's frame or receiver, and commercial sellers of these kits must become federally licensed and run background checks prior to sale, just like they have to do with other commercially made firearms. So what are they referencing there with buy, build, shoot kits? So I don't know, probably 2 years ago now at this point, a company called Polymer 80, which made firearms kits that could turn a product like this, like an 80% lower or frame, whatever the case, whatever you want to call it, into a firearm with a jig and things like that. And the ATF issued letters on those saying that they were perfectly legal because they were not firearms and did not meet the definition of a firearm. Yet somehow when the Polymer 80 added in the slide that goes with it, then they said if you buy that all at once, then it's a firearm. But if you buy them separately, it's not a firearm. So it made no sense. So that's why they're specifically saying the buy, build, shoot kits are going to be called firearms in this final rule, as they say, but they really don't clarify if something like this would be. Again, the actual text of the law that they're trying to pass, which is really a rule or opinion, has not been released yet. They say it's going to be released within 120 days. That's their claim. And then the final rule will also help turn some ghost guns already in circulation into firearms. Really? How are you going to do that? Through this rule, the Justice Department is requiring federally licensed dealers and gunsmiths taking any unserialized firearms into inventory to serialize that weapon. For example, if an individual builds a firearm at home and then sells it to a pawnbroker or another federally licensed dealer, that dealer must put a serial number on the weapon before selling it to a customer. This requirement will apply regardless of how the firearm was made, meaning it includes ghost guns made from individual parts, kits, or by 3D printers. So let me back up on that for folks that don't understand how U.S. law works. Americans have always been able to build their own firearms. since 1791 when the Constitution was around, and even before that when we were a colony. Forges were relatively common. People made their own firearms, they made their own cannons, and that was perfectly legal, and it still is perfectly legal to this day. If you want to build a cannon for yourself, it's 100% legal. The key there is for yourself. If you're building it to sell, then again, you do have to serialize it and go through the hoops that we have to go through with our modern gun laws. So that permit that they're saying there is how it's always been. They're acting like it's a change, but if I built this receiver out into a functioning firearm that would meet the ATF's definition, and then I went to pawn it at a gun shop, then they would, of course, have to serialize it and make a record of it and do a 4473 if they transferred it. That's the way it's always been. They're trying to say it's something new. It's absolutely not true. The only thing that might be new with this new law or rule is the gunsmith portion of it. Gunsmiths don't have to be FFL, so they don't have to have their federal firearms license. So I'm not sure if they're trying to say that now they have to or what, but that's the only thing there that's a little bit new. Everything else has always been the case. This rule builds on the Biden administration's prior executive action to rein in the proliferation of ghost guns. In February 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice launched a National Ghost Gun Enforcement Initiative, which is training a national cadre of prosecutors and disseminating investigation and prosecution tool to help bring the cases against those who use ghost guns to commit crimes. That is terribly written. As President Biden said during an event at the New York Police Department headquarters, if you use a ghost gun to commit a crime, not only are state and local prosecutors going to come after you, but expect federal charges and federal prosecution as well. Yeah, we'll see on that, but a lot of federal gun laws are absolutely not enforced. Like, for example, when Hunter Biden lied on his 4473 saying he wasn't a drug user and then purchased a revolver illegally, he's never been prosecuted for that on the federal level. So we'll see about that. It may just be a tool of political prosecution that they use selectively as they see fit. Now, the final two parts here are very important and significant. It goes on to say, today's final rule includes 2 additional actions to make our communities safer. First, the rule ensures that firearms with split receivers are subject to regulations requiring serial numbers and background checks when purchased from a licensed dealer, manufacturer, or importer. Decades ago, ATF issued a regulation defining the frame or receiver of a firearm as the part that is regulated by the Gun Control Act, meaning that is the part that triggers federal serialization, background check, and other requirements. At that time, many firearms in the United States were single-framed firearms, like revolvers, that house key components in a single structure. However, we have seen the increasing popularity of firearms using split or multi-part receivers that house key components in multiple structures. Some courts have recently interpreted decades-old regulatory text in a way that, if broadly applied, could mean that as many as 90% of firearms in the United States today would not have a frame or receiver subject to federal regulation. The final rule updates the regulatory definition of frame and receiver to ensure that firearms using split and multi-part receivers continue to be covered by common sense laws. So where is this coming from? Well, if you guys remember back, I did a video on it, but essentially in California, there was a guy who was basically taking 80% receivers and handing them to a customer who would put them in a jig, press the button on the jig, the customer would, and that would mill everything out so that way it would function as an AR-15 low receiver, which by the law is 100% legal. Now, what they charged him with was illegally selling AR-15 receivers, which he wasn't doing, but anyway, that's what they charged him with. And when it went to court, the ATF and their expert witnesses had to testify that an AR-15 lower receiver does not meet the definition of a firearm, because it doesn't. And additionally, there's a lot of other guns that do not meet the definition of a firearm. I should be rolling that in here on your screen so you guys can see it, but it has to have components that are common housed within it. Like this said for the revolver example, a Remington 870 would also meet their definition, but a lot of firearms, the vast majority of them in America, do not meet the definition of a firearm, and the ATF doesn't want this getting exposed and then leading to a case where people don't have to do background checks to buy things like AR-15s, because that really would be the case if we as America followed the law rather than the ATF's rules, and they don't like that. Second, the final rule requires federally licensed firearms dealers to retain key records until they shut down their businesses or licensed activity. At that time, these dealers must transfer the records to the ATF, just as they are currently required to do at the end of licensed activity. Previously, these dealers were permitted to destroy most records after 20 years, making it harder for law enforcement to trace firearms found at crime scenes. According to ATF's National Tracing Center, on average, more than 1,300 firearms a year are untraceable because the federally licensed firearms dealer destroyed the relevant records that were more than 20 years old. So this is part of what I talked about in a video I did in January, talking about the ATF's illegal database. So by law, the federal government is not allowed to have a firearms database in any way, shape, or form. It's absolutely not acceptable. It is explicitly prohibited by law. Yet the ATF has one, and they have one that is digitally scannable. They say they don't, but they do. And all the FOIA requests that have been done by members of Congress and media organizations have proved it. And I believe it was 90 days ago, several congressmen released a letter to the ATF demanding that they explain why they have this digital records and database that they say isn't a registry. They call it a database, but it's definitely a registry, and it's scannable, so that way they can find out everyone who's purchased a gun on a 4473, where they live, because their address is in there, and what guns they have. So that, again, of course, they shouldn't have. And one way that they were unable to maintain records of all firearms bought legally in America was the fact that dealers were only required to maintain their records for 20 years. So after 20 years, for example, I am an FFL. I have not had my FFL for more than 20 years. So if I went out of business tomorrow, I would legally have to turn over all of my records to the ATF. But if I was in business 20 years in one day, anything that's older than that one day, I could destroy immediately and never have to turn into the ATF. And they don't like that because it makes them maintaining a database of where all of the firearms in America are more difficult. So if you think about it more broadly, if you look around the world, the history of the world, of civilizations, anytime that there is a firearm seizure by the government, it's precluded by a registry. If the guns aren't registered anywhere, how's the government going to know which door to knock on to seize them? Of course, sending men with guns from the government to seize your legally purchased and owned guns. That's what they want to do. That is the end game for that second part of that rule. Additionally, on the first part of the rule, I mentioned the AR-15s. Another thing that very well could impact regarding AR-15s is upper receivers as well. So they could, if they redefine this rule a certain way, require that your require that your AR-15 upper receiver is now a firearm. You need to do a transfer fee for each of them. You need to have them serialized, adding $50 to $100 cost to every AR-15 that you own should this rule go through. So as I said in the beginning, the action step for this video is twofold. Number one, contact your congressman, because they are the ones who make law. The ATF, DOJ, the president cannot make law. That's what they're attempting to do here, which once again would literally turn millions of legal, law-abiding gun owners in America into felons overnight. Literally, that's what they're trying to do. It's very scary, and this, like I said, could be all of these rules could very easily be used as a tool of political prosecution going forward in America. It may sound crazy, but look back 2 years right now and look at what's going on and has gone on over the last 2 years, and then tell me it's crazy. It's not crazy. It's very plausible and very likely what they're trying to do. A link to contact all of your congressmen, House of Representatives, and senators will be down below. Additionally, contact your governors and state reps so that way they can continue to pass Second Amendment sanctuary type of laws. I will get to that in another video. Trust me on that. I have it in the works, but they're certainly a good thing if they're done a certain way. Additionally, join and support groups that are out there fighting against this. The top three that come to my head, off the top of my head, in no particular order, are Gunners of America here, that you see on my head, on the hat, Firearms Policy Coalition, and NAGR. They're all no compromise gun rights groups, and they will oppose these very quickly. You will probably see lawsuits and injunctions and those things coming from those groups, hopefully others as well. But unlike the NRA, which is all about compromising your gun rights away, those three groups do not. There may be others like them as well, but those are the ones that I know of and stand behind, so there'll be links down below to support those folks as well. Additionally, share this video, because if people don't know this is happening, they're not going to be able to contact the representatives to tell them this is unacceptable. Like I said, there are millions of people that have things that this bill pertains to. Just the AR-15 upper receiver alone. I mean, how many AR-15s are in America? 100 million, 150 million at least. Most of them don't watch YouTube gun channels. It's just the way it is, right? So share this video on your social media so that way your friends who own these types of items can oppose it and know that the ATF is trying to turn them into criminals overnight. And with that, guys, I suppose we will close the video out. If you liked the video and you aren't subscribed yet, definitely hit the subscribe video, because unfortunately I do these videos all too often. Additionally, there's all different social media sites that I post on. You can see my links down below. If you aren't following me or at them rather, please go ahead and do so, because you never know when I'll be kicked off of here any day for these types of videos. Additionally, we have 2 different email lists that you can sign up for, because again, we never know when I will be kicked off of social media platforms. I'm on my 4th Instagram page right now, and I suspect that will probably go up in the future. So there is that. Thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate it. I hate doing these types of stupid videos, but they need to be done. Regardless, I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.